Hello YouTube, it's Emmanuel Akujobi once again. In this video, we'll be talking about Affinity Designer and how you can create patterns using the software. We'll be looking at the three different methods by which you can create patterns in Affinity Designer. We'll look at the general methods, which I would refer to as the manual method. We'll look at the use of symbols, how you can create symbols and use the symbols to generate patterns in Affinity Designer. And then we'll look at how you can create elements and use this element as fill tools to create patterns in Affinity Designer. We will take it a notch higher by looking at how we can apply these patterns to on-demand products such as t-shirts. I would also like to use this opportunity to say a very big thank you to every one of you who had reached out to me while I was away. I've been away for about 6 months and life happened, work, family, and general upskilling, and then trying to get better gadgets for better production. I appreciate the comments and the feedback, most especially for those of you that encouraged me to come back on YouTube to continue what I've started. I really do appreciate. Please like, subscribe, and click on the notification bell so that you get a notification each time I put up a new video. Hello, so I'm back. Good to be back. Good to hear from you. I can't wait for the comments that will come after this video, and I'm hoping that this video would add value and help improve your design process. And so if you're with me on this, let's jump right in. In my previous videos, I have talked about how you can use nodes. I have talked about how you can create shapes. These pre-made shapes that I had mentioned in past videos, we will use some of those pre-made shapes to see how we can create patterns. That these are the patterns we'll be looking at. The manual one, which would pretty much be talking about how you would use any vector elements in Affinity Designer to create patterns manually. And depending on how you want to put that technique to use, I believe this oftentimes comes in handy when you need to just finish up something or when you feel there's no need for these other processes. And the semi-flexible method is kind of a bit, I wouldn't use the word automated, but it has a bit of that feel where you can store up an element and use that element repeated where you need to. And what happens in this case is by the time you touch the original element, the resultant effect is replicated amongst other elements. And then we have the flexible type where if you had gone ahead to create a symbol and you now convert that symbol to either a PNG or a JPEG, and now applying you know how you apply your fill tool naturally. Now, instead of applying your fill tool as color, you now apply it as bitmap and reference the bitmap you have exported to populate or to create that repeating pattern. So these are some of the activities we'll be looking at in this video, and I'm hoping that you would find value and they would help you in your design process. I also mentioned that we'll be looking at our pre-made shapes in Affinity Designers, and if you remember, I mentioned that our pre-made shapes can be gotten from the side of the tool, and these are our pre-made shapes. However, that's not what we're looking at today, but we will touch base with them because we would need a couple of them or just one amongst other pre-made tools to create the patterns we would love to use in Affinity Designer. But before we proceed, I'd like us to go on Google and look up patterns. I want to see repeating patterns so that I can reference that in designs. Now, this is a typical example of a repeating pattern. This is something we can design, but we might not be doing this exactly. But you would see how this can be produced effortlessly without necessarily having to stress yourself as to what you need to do to create such patterns in Affinity Designer. Okay, let's jump right into the first technique, which is called the manual technique. We'll pull this cog element, we'll copy it, and we'll pull it into the vectors we have already created. just expand to kind of fill in the, I will give it a shade that is not completely white, maybe ash kind of, so that whatever we're going to be using it for later on will find use for that particular color. So in this manual technique, this is pretty much more like the technique you would use every other time when you do your designs, without necessarily having to think of an automated way of going about it, or having to pull it up as a symbol or something. And what this technique simply means is, okay, we've created like 3 different, so to speak, let's call them artboards within this canvas, and all we just need to do is copy this. This is pretty much what you would naturally do if you were to do this manually. You copy this, you hold down your Alt, and you drag, you position the cog, you hold down the next one, you drag, you position, yeah, you kind of combine the 4 of them, and you try to see how you can properly align them. And you can furthermore repeat that process by copying this, coming to the larger artboard, place them, and for all intents and purposes you can decide to further, reduce the size, just to create that feel of having this on the larger artboard. And you can Ctrl J, and you can group the rest of this. And try how you can see if you can put them into this. Let's just say typically this is how you would manually create your pattern, which I believe every designer will be familiar with this process. Talk about the semi-flexible techniques, where that particular cog element will now be used as a symbol and replicated across boards in these other artboards which I have created. Now this is the cog that had been copied and placed into this smaller artboard. But in this case, now that we have this cog selected, what we not want to do is to create a symbol with this cog, such that we can always call it in when we need to. And how do we do that? We come to this part of this right hand part, depending on where you position yours. Come to this right hand part of Affinity Designer, and you click on symbols. Where you have symbols, you click on create. Automatically I can see Affinity Designer had created a clean replica of the cog you have in that first artboard as a symbol. You can further rename your symbol, and you can call it cog, just for the sake of renaming. Now with this, we can now decide to pull it from here. You can decide to pull it from here and position it within the space, and then repeat the same thing we did when we're doing the manual process. Same thing we did when we're doing the manual process. And there you go. Okay, there you go. So in this case, now we can go ahead, still position this element the way we want them to be positioned. Like this. Now, the major difference between the manual technique and this technique is that while we're doing the manual technique, if you would need to edit any pattern, any of those elements within this pattern, you will have to do it manually. But in this semi-flexible technique where you have to convert an element, one of the pattern elements, into a symbol, what this does for you is, if you need to change the color, you would not need to click any of the elements to change the color. All you need to do is go to your original elements that you created, and you can now go ahead to play with the colors. You get that, right? Voila. You get that. Now, let's assume this is a different element. Let's assume these are different elements, and we want to use this. Oh, sorry. I want to use this. Okay. Now what we have done is we have decided to create something a bit different from what we have. Okay. Into, let's make it this. Okay. Okay. With that being said, we can go to symbol and create another. Now, as you can see, we have two symbols. Now, if we choose to remove, let's say remove this middle symbol, and let's say we remove these middle symbols. So we remove this symbols. Yeah, and we decide to plant this guy. Okay, now what we'll be doing is, for us to change this element, all we need to do is change from here, and it will reflect. For us to change this element, all we need to do is change from here, and it will reflect. We can edit this, and it will affect everything, as you can see. So whatever you do to this original element, it goes on to affect what you have. Okay, now let's move on to the flexible technique. And in this case, instead of just using symbols now, what we will do, we will see how we can apply the three different steps, the three different techniques we have. We'll look at how we can use manual approach to bring in the first element. Then we'll use the symbol to create the pattern we want to see. Yeah, and then we will now export the pattern and use it on the artboard. Then we'll now look at how we can apply it. Right? Good. Now, this is the cog element we have brought in, and that can only be done manually. Pull it from wherever you're pulling it from. Now, with this cog symbol, now we want to see how we can create a symbol out of this cog. Right? Now, we don't just want to use the cog itself. We want to be able to creatively position them so that it won't just look at it like lots of cogs were placed on the shirt, but it will look like it was creatively and intentionally positioned. Now, we'll copy this and we'll move it into this paste, and here we are. But this time around, we would reduce it a bit, just so that we have a bit of control. Right, and we'll just play around this until we get what we're probably looking for. So let's zoom this right in. And I'm just going to speed up this process a bit so until we get what we're looking for, and then I'll just come back and we'll continue from where we stopped. So this is what we've been able to create as a symbol. So what the next we'll do is copy this for group and then create a symbol. You can now come here to say we want to place this guy. The beauty about this is I can choose to export this particular guy. Now watch. Export. All documents, selection only. Right? Let's make it a bit large. Let's make it 1000 by 1000. And yes. Right? Cork. At this point, I can decide to delete this. And on this particular document, on this particular artboard, I can decide to fill it up. Now watch. I come to this place where I have my fill tool. I click on it. I come to this place. I click on Bitmap. Now, it shows me this. Then I click Open. This is what we have. Now you can decide to adjust it to any point or whatever way you want to have it. You can decide to do whatever you want. You don't have to rack your brain as to how do I create this tiny bit and all of that. All you needed to do is create a pattern the way you want them, export them as a PNG or a JPEG, and voila, by the time you import them, this is what you would have. Now that we have learned how this thing works, how might we apply this approach to a proper production process? Say you have a t-shirt, but this time around we'll still use the fill option called the bitmap option. Okay, and here we have the same cog, since that's the base element we'll be using. But in this case, this particular shirt already I think I pulled up a random shirt from, I searched for it on Google, and this is the shirt. So I brought it back into Affinity Designer. I traced it out to remove the white background, and this is what we have. So currently, this particular shirt, the image is right underneath the curve. That's right underneath the trace, the pencil trace I have done on this. We can go ahead to fill up the shape using that same principle. Fill type bitmap, and here we go. And then we can further play around with what we want. Then we can let it sit. Trying to look for a perfect blend. Yeah, I think we're almost there. It's almost a perfect blend. So this is here. We're able to automatically create pattern on the shirt. Okay, so I hope I've been able to explain, and I hope you've been able to pick out something out of this particular video. We've been able to create patterns, we've been able to look at the manual way of going about it, we've been able to look at the semi-manual way, semi-flexible way, that is the conversion of elements to symbols. We've been able to look at how we can use the fill tool to create patterns in Affinity Designer and how we can apply them to t-shirts for online use. Having said all of these, please, if you find this video very useful, please like, share, subscribe, comment, click on the notification bell so that you'll be able to know when I put up a new video. If you have alternative ways of going about, or if you feel I have omitted a couple of things, or you feel there are better ways to approach this tutorial or better ways to approach this technique, please go down in the comment section and let us know what you think. That will be all for now, and ciao.